Earlier this year, I had taken a really fun workshop with the artist Lindsay Werrick. She does a lot of really fabulous demos and product reviews, all sorts of fun creative things over on her YouTube channel. She also does classes for Michael's online, Michael's art supply store in the US. So this was a really fun one where we were creating a bowl of ice cream using watercolors as well as watercolor pencils and just really building it up section by section. And it was really fun to walk through the steps that Lindsay uses to approach art making with these mediums. So Lindsay takes us through the process step by step, laying down the colors and then dropping other colors into it and really kind of going for the feeling of a sherbet ice cream, different scoops of different multicolored, multi-flavored ice creams, which sounds delicious. So it was really fun to kind of put in that base color and then drop some other colors into it. And then while that watercolor was still wet, going in with some liquid water or going in with some watercolor pencils to continue beefing up some areas and also adding in some texture. Watercolor pencils are a newish medium for me. I've got a lot of background with colored pencil. I've got a lot of background with watercolor, but a watercolor pencil is something that I'm still kind of navigating and getting into. So I was super excited to come across Lindsay's session teaching about how to use watercolor pencils with watercolor and especially the texture that they could add. So you'll see me occasionally going in with my terry cloth. That's because occasionally watercolor kind of goes beyond where you want it to, so you can just do a little bit of erasing with a dry terry cloth or even with a damp terry cloth to kind of pick up the color and then go back in with the dry to kind of bring the paper back to a relatively dry state. So with watercolor, you jump around a bit, right? Like you're kind of working in different sections and you have to let certain things dry to a certain point. And that was a really wonderful thing about this because we did that, but then we were also still working back into different sections also as we went. So we started working on the ice cream in the ice cream bowl and kind of blocking in some of those key colors and building up some of the bleeds that we wanted. And then we jumped down to the cherries that are on the ground and playing around with blotting so that we could get a really neat value effect to start to create the roundness of the cherries. And then going in and starting to add in some details for the stems and the leaves attached to those cherries. So at this point, I was kind of a little nervous, but I was also super excited. So I was just trusting the process, trusting where Lindsay was leading us, and really having a lot of fun working on this really colorful picture. And she had a really great reference images for us to use. And I think she also had a sketch that we could easily kind of download and transfer, but I did end up free-sketching mine. It didn't take too long to kind of get that mapped out on the paper. So here I am going back in, adding some more texture with those watercolor pencils, playing around with that and kind of seeing how I can get them to create the effects that Lindsay's getting, as well as kind of pushing them in my own style, my own way, and then playing around with the different color variations that the pencil set had to get the different values and color, hues that I wanted. I've done a couple classes with Lindsay. I think this one might have just one had been on her website. I'd also done another one that she had did through Danny Gregory's Sketchbook School. That was really fun. That one also involved desserts, which was kind of crazy. But she's just a fantastic teacher, and she just has such a wonderful energy and just shares so much about what she has learned over her years as an artist and the different supplies that she experiments with. And I really appreciate all the time that she puts into her YouTube channel to share all of that with her audience. So continuing on with the bowl, adding in some more colors, building up some more values, jumping back and forth between the watercolor with the paintbrush and the watercolor with the pencils, and then back in with the paintbrush. And then it was time to start addressing the glass bowl. So this is a transparent bowl, but we were really playing with embracing color to have the vibrancy kind of carry down from the ice cream to the bowl, but also still keep that transparent quality to it. And then also, so kind of laying in the base colors for that, and then jumping up to the spoon that's sticking into the ice cream and starting to build up with grays, the shape of that. And then there's a couple different cherries up on the top of the ice cream. So just really jumping all over the place, kind of building it up bit by bit and just trusting where Lindsay was taking us. And then it was time to start working on some of the leaves that were on top of the sundae. So a lot of this was done with the watercolor pencils, kind of jumping back and forth between the different greens to build up the texture as well as the values, and jumping back and forth, and then activating that with a smaller watercolor brush so that stylistically it matched the rest of the painting that we were creating. And then we started adding in the stems using the watercolor pencils, kind of building those up and keeping that fineness, which was really exciting. And then going back into the dish and starting to add in some blacks and grays to really start defining the form of it and to really make it feel like it was a three-dimensional element on the page. And this was a little terrifying. Going with black watercolor is a pretty intense step, but I just trusted Lindsay and was really happy with how it turned out in the end. It was definitely a step that I would have been very hesitant to take on my own. And just knowing that these harsh black lines were eventually, going to get mellowed out to become the glass bowl and make it really feel like the ice cream was sitting inside of the bowl and was containing it and not just, a cartoon style line going into it. I did have a tiny bit of trouble getting the effect that I wanted to on my spoon, but I was still really happy with that part as well. And then really just using the black to add some really bold pops of values to add some even further roundness to the cherries and elements to the leaves. And then mellowing all of that out with a clean wet brush so that it didn't become too intense in those areas. And the next step involved using white gouache. So I got out an extra little palette and got some white gouache out of my tube and a clean, smaller flat brush so that I could start mapping in where the transparent whiteness was going to happen on the glass to really start popping the glass out from the ice cream. So we just kind of went in pretty bold with the edges of our dish and some highlight areas where the glass was kind of reflecting to kind of start creating the feeling of the ice cream pushing up against a glass dish. And this was also pretty terrifying to kind of paint over all these beautiful, colorful bits of ice cream that I had painted. But I love a challenge and I love learning new ways to work with materials that I feel really comfortable with. And kind of stepping outside my comfort zone is just really a wonderful thing to do. And this is definitely new skills to me that I hadn't tried before. So it was really cool to really kind of dive into an area that felt comfortable, but also was, taking me to a new place. And then after putting in those wash sections, we kind of went back and forth between popping the boldness and then fading them out, so that everything had a really nice cohesion to it and it wasn't just white spots sitting on top of a colored object. And it really kind of started to feel like reflections of the glass, and it really kind of made it make more sense in a realistic sense and not just, be layers of processes in a step. And we did the same thing with the spoon. We kind of went back in to kind of add some highlight there and kind of help it feel more like a metal spoon and less kind of like a cartoon drawing of a spoon. And then the next step was to put in some shadow on the ground to kind of help it all sit down so it wasn't kind of floating in a white space. So she was very great about encouraging looseness here and just kind of start building up those dark bits underneath it, and then take the damp brush to kind of, soften it out and help it all to kind of unify a bit. She also encouraged us to paint in the background as well so that we could have a little bit of softening back there. So we've got a little bit of shadow on the ground, and then we pop some of the color from our ice cream into the background as a unifying element, and also just to add visual interest as well. This is always a good idea. If you've got color in one section of your picture, you should, try to put it somewhere else as well so that it feels cohesive and it doesn't feel like, kind of you know, a random bit of color in one spot. And then she also encouraged us to splatter into the background. So we did a little bit of splattering wet on wet for that, so that because the background was already wet, that gave kind of a nice softness to it. And then in any great online class, everybody turns on their cameras and holds up their picture to share with everybody else. So this was really fun. Definitely check out Lindsay's website channel. Definitely check out her classes on the Michaels website. She's just such an energetic artist who really has a passion for what she does and for sharing that with her audience. I can't wait for Lindsay's next class, and I hope you enjoyed it. Give the video a like if you did, subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time.